Hello and welcome to another video. I hope you're doing absolutely great, and I have a real treat for you today. I am taking the first dish I ever made for this channel and taking it in a very, very different direction. So, when I first started this channel, one of the first dishes I made, in fact the first dish I made, was a smörgåstårta with wild garlic and yogurt. This was sort of an Easter-themed one. It came out around Easter in 2020 and had eggs, wild garlic, a bunch of things like that. Very, very delicious. But today we're going to make another smörgåstårta, and we're going to make a New Year's themed one. Now, I should describe smörgåstårta again, for those who haven't seen the first video. A smörgåstårta is sort of the Swedish ostentatious open-faced sandwich. And the thing is, sandwiches are really, really critical to Scandinavian cuisine, and they are more or less a social institution into themselves. So in Denmark, for example, we have smørrebrød, which many people know. In Sweden, you have both the smörgåsbord, the sandwich buffet, which is central to Christmas dinners and things like that. But you also have the smörgåstårta, the sandwich cake. And this is something that came out of the 70s. It is an expression of, I would say, sort of the ostentatious, open-faced sandwiches that you kind of see within Swedish cuisine itself. One thing that makes this very unusual as an open-faced sandwich is that it is multi-deck. Okay? So it's multiple layers of bread in an open-faced sandwich, which sounds really crazy. And then it's covered in like cream cheese and decorated so it looks, you know, maybe some of them even look like dessert cakes. So great, great dish. And so today we're going to do a New Year's themed one. Now, where I come from in the US, the food that is most always associated with New Year's is caviar. Caviar in Swedish cuisine is much more widely eaten, but in the US, people typically get caviar specifically for New Year's celebrations. And so for me, caviar still has that connection with New Year's, even though that's a very American thing. While in Sweden, you have like caviar cream in tubes that you put out on crisp bread for breakfast any day of the year. So differences in culture aside, this is something which then has Swedish and American influences, and again, it is my version of this dish. On to the ingredients. Now, the main two ingredients in filling will be a strained yogurt. You could use a Greek style or a Turkish style yogurt. I chose to use an even heavier strained yogurt than this, a skyr. This is an Icelandic, basically a quark. You could use quark also, that would work very well, along with mayonnaise, and we will flavor it with horseradish, and we'll probably put in about half of this salmon roe caviar. I think this is, no, this is trout. So we'll put in half of this trout caviar. Probably also, I think I'm going to put in some Parmesan cheese, mostly because Parmesan, you can get it nicely, you can get it fairly easily, and the cheese I was thinking of is Västerbottensost, which has a flavor that many people would consider to be kind of somewhat similar to Parmesan. So I would say like a good Parmesan would be an option here. Then the main structure will be, as usual, with these smörgåstårtas, a very basic white bread. And then we'll decorate it with various colors of caviar. after coating the whole thing in softened cream cheese. So, to make the cream, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a decent size dollop of mayonnaise. And then I'm going to spoon in some skyr. Of course, I will rinse off the spoon between, because who likes cheese in their mayonnaise? Or mayonnaise in their cheese? I'm going to add about twice to 3 times as much of the strained yogurt. And I'm going to season it with... So I've taken this horseradish and I've finely shredded it. I'm probably going to put about... That's probably plenty. That's like about maybe half a teaspoon. I'm going to stir this up. And then I'll take a separate spoon and I will spoon in about half of this caviar. And if it's a little more than half, that's fine. Look at that. And then I'm going to just have a tiny taste. Definitely going to add some Parmesan cheese, maybe around a tablespoon or so. Stir this up. And here is the internal filling for the smörgåstårta. So now I have my bread with the crust removed, and I'm doing a very small smörgåstårta today, as small as possible. But of course, if we were doing a bigger one, we'd just simply have more bread and we'd spread it out laterally. So what I'm going to do is I have one piece of bread, crust removed, on the plate, and I'm going to basically take a significant part of my filling here, and I am going to basically pile it on top of this bread. And I like to go with about half of the filling at this point. After all, we don't eat sandwiches for the bread, we eat them for what we put on the bread, right? Then just use the knife to kind of straighten it up along the edges of the bread. This is probably the hardest part. And then we'll just simply take a second piece of bread and set it on top. And then I use the knife typically to just kind of make sure that the holes, if you will, if you put any pressure on this, it's going to kind of bulge out. And so I like to use the knife to just kind of make sure that, especially the corners, are nicely filled in. Otherwise, if you get a corner piece, you end up basically getting a lot of cream cheese, which is not really what most people want. And then we're going to do the same. And then we'll put in the last one. And then we will have the really hard part in a moment. But we can let this sit. If you're struggling at this point, you can let it sit for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and the bread will just start to absorb some of the liquid. Remember, what's going to happen is that the bread is going to soften into an almost cake-like consistency, and the internal cream is going to firm up into like a soft cheese consistency. So then after this point we will start basically, if you will, frosting it with softened cream cheese. So now it's time to sort of frost this. So what I've done is I've softened the cream cheese, and we're going to start with the sides. The reason I start with the sides is because the cream cheese at this point is often still a little bit more solid than the filling. And I also start with the cream cheese in the middle because it's also a little bit more solid, and this will provide some structural support for smörgåstårta as I frost it over. So we're actually going to use this cream cheese here on the side to basically shore up the structure of the sandwich, so that we can frost the top and decorate it without a problem. And you're going to get the cheese mixed a bit with the cream. So if you have a lot more cheese than you're going to use, probably separate it out into bunches. But once I have that done, then I can just kind of lightly spread some of this on the top. And then I will have to deal with the edges. Alright, so from here we're going to basically try to make sure the edges are nicely done, shore everything up. And so usually what I find is that if I go at the edges from both sides, it'll end up being acceptable. So there we have the basic frosted outside, and now we just need to decorate it. Now, we could decorate this in a few different ways. If I really wanted to, living in Germany at the moment, I could almost do like a German flag motif. Since this is almost yellow and I have something that's almost red and something that's almost black, but I'm not going to do that. I think I'm just going to put little sprinkles of caviar around on the outside. If I was feeling really industrious and I was adequately artistic, I could probably also like do really ornate this stuff as well, but I'm not going to do that either. So we have a few different colors here, so let's just put like some and then probably here would be a good time to clean up the plate after just sort of the initial part here, and then I could decorate the plate. So There we go. So now I'm going to clean up the plate. I'm going to do that first with a paper towel, and then with a paper towel dipped in vodka, just to clean it up a little bit nicer, and then I'll be right back. So now we have the plate cleaned up. I'm just going to dribble a little bit of caviar on the outside, because sometimes decorating the plate makes everything look more classy. And here we have our Caviar Smörgåstårta. Just moving everything out a bit, so you can see it just as it is. We could also put like little bits of maybe tomato or cucumber or something else to help decorate it. Chopped herbs of some kind, whatever we'd like, we could just sprinkle it on top. That would be it also. But as you can see, this is very basically a 3-tier open-faced caviar sandwich. So this is going to get set aside for another hour or so, let things continue to soften up a little bit, and then I'll be back for the taste test. And now for the taste test. Now I've cut a little bit of the time out in normally letting this age, primarily because of my schedule today, so I don't expect the textures to be perfect. I think that would take another couple hours. But I'm going to go ahead and do the taste test anyway, and we'll go ahead and see how this is. My recommendation is around 2-3 hours in the fridge, but more is probably okay, less ought to work also. So here we go. It's actually nice set of flavors. The sourness from the skyr and the cream cheese nicely complements the caviar. It's not overly done, despite of how much caviar is in this. Yeah, I think this is good. This is definitely something I could see making for example, a New Year's Eve party or something. Anyway, tack. Thank you very much for watching. Bon appetit, and see you next week. Let me try that again. If you find this content useful and interesting, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. And if you've subscribed, there's a little notification option you can select, and you can say you would like all videos for notifications, and that way you won't miss any more videos that I release. That also helps YouTube determine what you like, and might in fact help recommend other channels similar to mine. At any rate, thank you very much for watching. Tack så mycket. And bon appetit, and see you next week.